Beware. The Patchwork Man froze. The thought had not been his own. It had a fizzing, buzzing quality like a swarm of bees in his brainstem. They were talking to him. He had learned not to ignore them. He slipped behind the thick trunk of an oak tree and turned his big head, mismatched vertebrae clicking as he scanned the clearing. The canopy was still and silent in the afternoon light. The birds had flown away when they saw him coming, the squirrels disappearing into their holes, hedgehogs cowering in their burrows. Even the insects had vanished. It was as if no living thing could bear to look upon him. Beware, they said again. The buzzing grew louder, a tingle running down his spine, making his toes twitch inside his leather boots. Soon he saw it, a loop of wire, half buried in the leaf litter ahead. He moved closer, his misshapen limbs creaking with each heavy step. A stone slab came into view, balanced on a bough high above, bound in thick rope. If he stepped in the loop, he would presumably be pulled into the air by his ankle while the counterweight descended. Then he would be trapped here until the doctor came for him, unpicked his stitches, pulled him apart. The Patchwork Man bent over, touched his fingertips to the ground and closed his eyes. The energy surged down his arm and vibrated the dirt, breaking up the clods and making it as soft as sand. He pushed his hand into the ground and found something solid, a tree root. He crushed it in his giant fist and wrenched the broken wood upward, soil cascading off the sides. Then he made his way over to the trap. He was about to toss the severed limb into the wire loop, triggering the counterweight, when he heard something, a wheezing, groaning sound like a set of bellows. He whirled round in time to see something take shape in the fog, a tall blue box with a flashing light on top. He stared at it, his hand still clenched round the broken root. Was this another of the doctor's tricks? Whatever it was, it wouldn't stand between him and his revenge. The Patchwork Man tossed the tree root into the thick shrubbery, leaving the trap untouched. Then he walked away from the blue box, melting into the mist and shadow.
And that jarring cacophony tells you you're back with the Power of Three podcast, looking at one of those very rarely spotted things, an original novel featuring the Ninth Doctor, and Rose of course. I'm Kenny Smith, and today the Power of Three is looking at Frankenstein and the Patchwork Man, which was the 7th novel to be released in the Puffin Classics crossovers range. So far we've had the Doctor meeting the likes of Robin Hood, going into the land of Oz, encountering the heroes of classical Greek fiction, indeed Wonderland as well, so this is the latest one. It was released on the 24th of April 2025 by BBC Children's Books. It was written by Jack Heath, and the novel is loosely based on the novel Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus, by Mary Shelley, and it has a cover by Angelo Rinaldi. Now, who is Jack Heath, I can hear you wondering, as he's not a familiar name to Doctor Who fans. He's coming up shortly, but we can tell you that Jack wrote his debut novel, The Lab, in secondary school and sent it to a publisher at the age of 17. He's now the award-winning author of 40 novels for adults and children, including the international bestsellers Hangman, The Wife Swap, and 300 Minutes of Danger. His books have been translated into 10 languages, optioned for TV, and adapted for film. And he lives in Canberra, Australia, with his wife, their children, several chickens, a few fish, and a possum named Oreo. And I can honestly say that we've not had anyone on the podcast before who's got a pet possum. So, yes, different. We do like to be different. So let's have a look at the cover of the book, and we can see that It's the Ninth Doctor and Rose running through a graveyard. Rose looking very cool with some denim on, the Doctor looking dashing as ever, and it's a lovely shade of sort of electric blue as they walk through that graveyard. But could there be electricity in the story? Well, of course there is. It's looking at Frankenstein and so on, so yes. And as we turn the book over, we can see it tells us in the back. He tidied his hair, smoothed down his vest and extended a hand. "Perhaps we can begin anew," he said. "Dr. V. Frankenstein, at your service." When an unsettling folktale leads the Ninth Doctor and Rose to a remote village in Wales, they get more than they bargained for. A scientist has taken it upon himself to create new life, imitating Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, a book that has sent shockwaves around the country. But, much like his fictional counterpart, this Doctor is playing God, and with forces beyond his understanding. As the Doctor and Rose attempt to put the brakes on the experiment before it gets out of control, a sinister supernatural presence reveals itself. So, before we meet Jack, we're going to have a reading from the book. At the top of the podcast you heard the prelude read for us by Craig Brawley, and Craig's back here with the Doctor and Rose at the start of the adventure. And let's find out what they get up to.
Rose Tyler followed the Doctor out of the TARDIS and looked around. They were in a dense, silent forest. The trees were gnarled and twisted, the leaves withered or long since fallen. The dirt was damp underfoot, and a cold fog drenched everything. She turned round and tried to re-enter the TARDIS. "Oh, no, you don't." The Doctor grabbed her shoulder and steered her away from the door. "This will be the experience of a lifetime, and I won't let you miss it." Easy for him to say. His leather coat was warmer than her denim jacket, and he was 6 feet tall. His big ears were slightly above the fog. Rose was only 5'5", just short enough to be swallowed up by it. Even on tiptoes, she could hardly see. And she was getting nervous about the Doctor's plan. "I'm not sure I want to get surgery from an alien," she said. "Or anyone, actually. You'll love it. Having 4 arms is twice as good as having 2. That's just maths." Beaming, the Doctor locked the door of the TARDIS with a little silver key. "There are some cultures where basic sign language requires at least 3 hands, and trust me, you really don't want to be misunderstood by a Quilorian warrior." Rose raised an eyebrow. "Are we expecting to meet any of those?" "Nothing's impossible," the Doctor said. Rose looked doubtfully at the gloomy forest. She liked adventures, but would it kill the Doctor to take her to a day spa once in a while? Rose quite liked those massage chairs in shopping centres. Imagine how good they might be 100 years into the future. "Either way," she said, "I don't think Mickey would be too impressed if I came home with extra limbs." Disappointment flickered over the Doctor's face, perhaps because Rose had reminded him that she had a life back on Earth and that their adventures would someday end. But his irrepressible grin soon returned. "You might be surprised," he replied cheerfully. "It doesn't matter though, because they'll remove the add-ons before you leave. Proprietary technology, you see. They were very unimpressed when I tried to walk away with a third heart." "Remove?" Rose repeated. "There's one thing I like less than the idea of having arms added. It's having them chopped off." Again, she tried to return to the TARDIS, but the Doctor blocked her path. "Don't be like that," he said. "Have I ever put you in harm's way?" She crossed her arms over her chest. Many, many times. "All right, but I haven't not gotten you out of it again. If I lose an arm, my mum will be furious. With you. And you don't want to get on Mum's bad side. You're telling me I can still feel that slap."
Thank you so much for that, Craig. Now, I've done enough yakking. Craig's done enough. Let's meet Jack and welcome him to the Power of 3 from the other side of the world.
My name is Jack Heath. I'm a novelist from Canberra, Australia, Ngunnawal country, and I have written a number of things, but the reason I'm on the podcast is because I wrote a book called Doctor Who, Frankenstein and the Patchwork Man, which is one of the Puffin crossover books where the Doctor meets various public domain characters.
That's a very good point of stressing they are public domain. Makes things a lot cheaper for the BBC.
Yeah, that's right. When I was invited to do this, I didn't even have to think about it for half of a second before picking Frankenstein, but also after the the half of a second, I was like, oh, gee, they're geniuses. They don't have to pay any royalties to Bram Stoker or Baum, whoever wrote The Wizard of Oz, or whoever came up with Robin Hood. Yeah, so very clever.
Absolutely. And of course, talking very clever, having had a wee look online, you had your first novel published or accepted when you were still at school. That's very clever. That must have got you good marks in English.
Oh, you'd think, but I was always writing a novel instead of doing my homework. So actually, my grades were sort of middling. But yeah, I had been someone who always loved reading, and in fact, I actually came to Doctor Who via the books rather than via the show. So when I was a kid, this was sort of in the early. I was born in 1986, so in the early 90s. Whenever Doctor Who was on, it was often sort of late at night. It was unreliable, hard to be home and catch it at the right time. No, we didn't even have the capacity to record things in my house at those days. But secondhand bookshops were just chockers of novelizations of Doctor Who stories. So that meant, and I read as many of those as I could get my hands on because I just loved them. And then later in my life, when I saw some more of the show, so by then it's the sort of mid 90s and I'm watching things made in the mid 70s, and the I don't want to put any Doctor Who fans offside, but I think we can fairly acknowledge that maybe the special effects from the 70s weren't all that good compared to the other stuff that I was seeing that had been made more concurrently. So that meant that I still kind of preferred the books, because in your imagination you don't have a special effects budget. So and in addition to that, you can do some recasting. Like most of the Doctor Who adventures I read, they were often John Pertwee adventures that I would recast Tom Baker in my brain. Nothing against John Pertwee, but just you're picturing who you're picturing. So I just loved those books. And then later, when I came to sort of writing my own stories, I started writing a sort of action adventure novel. Think Alex Rider, but in the future type story. And I sent that off to a publisher when I was 17, and it was published when I was 19, and it did very, very well, which was fantastic, but also meant that I came crashing back down to earth when my second book absolutely flopped. So and so did sort of my third, fourth, fifth, sixth. But I knew that I loved writing, and I was. I'd love to pretend that I was a very resilient person. Actually, I think I was scared. I just didn't want to find something else to do with my life. But I kept going until eventually I had another hit, which was a children's book. And then I started writing for adults. And then that eventually led me to sort of coming around full circle to having the opportunity to write a Doctor Who book.
That's amazing. I mean, tell us about just your other, before we get to your Who work, tell us a wee bit about some of your other books that you have written, then just obviously, as you mentioned, going into more adult territory.
Yeah, okay. So there's bits and pieces. The stuff that I've written for children tends to be mostly sort of action adventure stuff. So that first one that I wrote in high school was called The Lab, and it did pretty well in the United States, which was a game changer for me at the time. Australia is quite a small market, so you can't really earn a living as a writer in Australia unless your books are also selling overseas, which some of my books have had that good fortune and some others have not. So more recently, but the sort of my breakout success in 2015 was a book called 300 Minutes of Danger, which was just a book of sort of interlinked short stories about characters in dangerous situations, and each one had 30 minutes to escape, and you were supposed to read them in real time. There was a countdown going in the margins. So I don't know if you had the show 24 in the UK, but if you imagine sort of 24 but for kids, it was like that. And then when I had the opportunity to write, so I'd always kind of wanted to write a book for adults, mostly because throughout my career, I've been the sort of person who I want to write the kind of thing that I would like to read. And so when I was old enough that I was no longer reading children's fiction, I wanted to start, I was reading adult fiction, and therefore I wanted to write it as well. So I wrote a book called Hangman, which was about an FBI consultant who was also secretly a cannibal.
I like that. Very dark.
It was extremely dark, and it was the kind of thing where you could, in retrospect, I can look at this sort of children's writer who is desperate to be taken seriously as a as a dark and brooding individual. But also I thought maybe this is the only novel for adults I will ever have the opportunity to write, because if it flops, then I won't get to do any more. So kind of I took everything that I knew I couldn't do in a children's book and stuffed it into this one. So it was a sort of pretty wild and crazy series, and luckily that was a hit. So it spawned a few sequels. But for a lot of people, you may be surprised to learn that cannibalism is considered a bit icky. So there are some people who love that series, and there are other people who will not even give it a try. They'll just be like, yuck, I don't want to read. Not only do I not want to read that, why would you write that? My mother is one of those people. So I instead, so a little while after that, but it was crime fiction, right? And I'd read a lot of crime fiction growing up, and I seemed to have a bit of a knack for it. So then I wrote a book which in Australia was called Kill Your Brother, and it was sort of a kind of more claustrophobic locked room thriller, and it did okay. And then I had the opportunity to write another one in that series called Kill Your Husbands. And the premise of that was that there were going to be these three couples, friends since high school, who go on holiday together. And one night, after a game of truth or dare and a bit of drinking, they decide to swap partners in the dark. But then when the lights come back on, one of the men is dead and no one can agree who he was with, and the car keys are missing and stuff like that. So that book did exceptionally well in Australia and was then published in the UK as The Wife Swap.
Oh, there we go. Lovely.
That's blurring on your screen, but
yep,
that's the one. Sorry, listeners, we're doing this over Zoom, and I just showed Kenny this very blurry book cover because of my Zoom blur. But anyway, so that got published in the UK, which was very exciting for me, and that means that my UK publisher, Embla Books, is republishing Kill Your Brother as well under the title of The Mistake. So that has just come out, I think, at time of listening. And so yeah, now I get so the first book came out in 2006. By 2017 I was able to write full time, and now I'm in the incredibly enviable position of being able to just kind of sit around daydreaming and then typing away at my computer, and then once a year or a couple of times a year having a book launch party where everyone shows up and tells me that I'm brilliant, and then I get to disappear back into my hidey hole again. I am living the dream, my friend.
Oh, I'm so jealous. Next time you have a party, bring me over. I've never been to Australia yet.
Oh, fantastic. I have always wanted to go to Scotland. And I've never ever had the opportunity. So I would, my sister-in-law is about to go over for the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. She's a stand-up comic.
Oh.
And I'm super jealous, but I have two young kids and they are in school, and I think it'll be a few years before I'm doing any more international travel.
Well, you'll need to let me know details about your sister-in-law's show, because I will go along and see her and say hello, because that would be a nice thing to do. Just support somebody vicariously.
You will love it. The show is about it's a whole stand-up comedy show about her father's time in prison, which is a true story. It's her name's Alice Tovey. Look it up. It's great. I saw it at the Sydney Comedy Festival just a couple of days ago, and I was like, wow, this is confronting, but also much funnier than it has any right to be.
Okay, we've got a deal. We have a deal there. I will have to go and see it. So, you're a best-selling author, and all of a sudden, Doctor Who official writing. How did that come about?
It came about because my agent at the time was and is a genius. She's now retired. Actually, I'm not sure she's using the retired word, but she's like taking a break from work, and I don't think ever coming back. But anyway, she looked after me for sort of most of my career, and she always just had her ear to the ground for opportunities. And one time she called me with a totally out of the blue query which was, she said, look, so the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who is coming up, and the BBC and Penguin Random House UK are doing a thing where they're getting 6 different authors to write 6 different books in 6 different decades, starring 6 different doctors to sort of celebrate the anniversary. Would you be interested in throwing your hat into the ring? And I said, did you already know that I was a Doctor Who fan? And she said, no, but you just seemed like the kind of person who would be. And I said, well, you are an excellent judge of character, Claire, because I have been reading Doctor Who books my entire life and watching the show my entire life. So yes, I would be thrilled to do that. So I pitched something to Penguin Random House UK, but unfortunately I pitched something in the 60s, and by the time I got that pitch in, that decade was already taken, and then so were all the others. So I was like, oh no, I missed my shot. But then Tom Rawlinson, who's then my publisher in the UK, he got back to me and he said, look, so we really liked your pitch though, and we can't use it, but since you clearly know the sort of the feel of Doctor Who, you seem like you would have what it takes to write a Doctor Who story. So we've got this other series going with the crossover with the public domain characters type stuff, Doctor Who meets the Wizard of Oz and Dracula and Robin Hood and all that stuff. Would you be interested in pitching one of those? And so I immediately put in my pitch for Doctor Who meets Frankenstein, because I didn't want to be pipped at the post again. And then after some back and forth with the outline, they were enthusiastic, but they had feedback, so it took us a few times to get the outline right. They said, yes, okay, make it so, go right ahead. So I wrote the book, and it was such a joy in a way that writing books isn't always. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my job, but it is a job, and most days it feels like one too. And the fun parts of the process are usually sort of daydreaming about how great the story is going to be. And the other fun part is looking at the story you've written and taking pride in how good it turned out. The miserable bit is the in-between bit, the actually writing it bit, where nothing is coming out how you intended. But because the Doctor is just such a fun character to write, and Rose too, so I opted to write about the Ninth Doctor and Rose because they were there were a few different options. At the time this deal was going through, it was just after David Tennant had taken the mantle for the second time. So the Doctor Who lore was kind of in a bit of flux at the moment, and so Penguin Random House UK, for reasons I still don't understand, said, obviously you'll have to write about either the Ninth Doctor or the 13th Doctor. And I didn't know why that was obvious, but I knew that I'd seen every single episode of Christopher Eccleston. I hadn't seen every single episode of Jodie Whittaker, so I thought I'd play it safe and stick with what was familiar. And in retrospect, the best thing about that was Rose. It wasn't that I understood Eccleston better than Whittaker. It was the fact that Rose is such a great character and so much fun to write about. And the difference between writing this and writing a normal book, like something else, is usually, and this is going to sound obvious. It is obvious, but I'm going to say it out loud anyway, since I started this sentence. It's the characters came pre-made. Like, the Doctor and Rose already exist. I could already picture them. I already could hear their voices in my head. So that meant that usually when I'm writing the first draft of a book, for a long time, the characters don't feel like people. They just feel like the background ones feel like cardboard cutouts, and the foreground ones just feel like puppets. But when it comes to the Doctor, and Rose too, you can kind of write a scene and you don't have to think, what should I do in this scene? You can just ask yourself, okay, so what would the Doctor do in this situation? Great, he can do that. And then you just type it out. And the dialogue, the number of sort of funny little jokes and stuff that you can make when you're writing for the Doctor that would not work for any other character on Earth. Like, there's a line in the book about how he's he just offhandedly refers to Pythagoras once having lent him a pocket calculator. And that's the kind of thing that no other character gives you the opportunity to make jokes like that, you know? So
Yeah.
I really, really loved this. And I'm hoping that I might get the chance to revisit that original pitch for the one in the 60s. Like maybe the BBC will let me do another one and I'll be able to revisit that idea because I think it was kind of cool too.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that this is the perfect time for Ninth Doctor and Rose, given that 20th anniversary of the series coming back, and also later this year, Big Finish start doing Eccleston and
I was
Piper
going to say,
Andrews.
there's going to be the audio series with Eccleston and Piper, right?
Yes.
Both coming back. That was amazing. When I saw that, I was like, oh yeah. But I think they've already cast the audiobook of Doctor Who, Frankenstein, and the Patchwork Man. I'm sure they've cast a very, very, very good narrator because they always do. But I'm also pretty sure it's not Christopher Eccleston or Rose Piper. So that's a bit of a shame, but yeah, I'll live with it.
Yeah, fantastic.
I won't live with it. I will love it. It'll be fantastic. I'm a big audiobook person, so I'm really looking forward to hearing what they do.
It's fantastic. It had to be done.
Very, very good. Yes, fantastic rather than brilliant. I had to several times in the draft because whenever I didn't explicitly picture Eccleston in my head, sort of bits of other doctors would start kind of trickling in, and I hadn't realized, I guess, that it wasn't until I started writing for this doctor specifically that I realized how different they were from one another, not just in the way that they look, but their mannerisms and their choice of words and stuff. And the excellent copy editors at Penguin Random House were sort of highlighting little lines of dialogue and saying, this reads a bit more like the 11th Doctor than the 9th, and stuff like that. So I was extremely fortunate to be working with a bunch of amazing Doctor Who nerds because I've been a fan my whole life, as you're getting, but I don't have that sort of encyclopedic knowledge that some of these people do. And even my brother, my brother is a massive Doctor Who fan. We both are. We grew up watching it together. But the other day, someone at the table that we were at asked him some kind of Doctor Who question, and he gave this very technical answer referring to the John Hurt Doctor and another. And I had seen that episode, but wouldn't have. I don't just have it on command the way he does. He seems to have this sort of filing cabinet that he can immediately pull something out of. Whereas I'm always going, what was that episode again? I mean, I imagine you've seen The Well, for example, the recent episode, The Well. I really liked that. It's probably not much of a... I'll keep it sort of spoiler-free for those who haven't seen it, but it refers to a previous episode of Doctor Who. That reference meant nothing to me. Like, I had seen the episode back in the day. I'm sure I loved it back in the day, but I just don't store the information in the same way. So it was so good that the BBC and Penguin Random House seem to be able to find this limitless number of people who have seen every episode and know every line and can catch every reference, so as they can sort of highlight this and go, actually, Rose's flat wasn't in that bit of East London.
That's brilliant. That's really good. I think that with this novel being set in Wales, I thought there's something clever in that, because I thought it's very much that Series 1 thing where there are stories. So we have 2 stories set in Cardiff, and I think this is quite nice, sort of tapping into that Welsh location and showcasing that Russell would do.
Yeah, well, Wales is another place that I've never been to, although my wife has family there, but it's sort of connections like a few generations back, so we've never had the opportunity to visit. But so I set this story in Wales just because I'm always kind of trying to remember the moments from the show and from the novels that made me feel strongly about something. Like, just, there's anything that made me laugh, or anything that, made me cry, or, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, or something like that. And one of the laughter moments was how utterly underwhelmed Rose was when the TARDIS took her to Cardiff. And I didn't even get the joke. I didn't know why Rose would be unimpressed by Cardiff. I was like, what's wrong with Cardiff? But that moment was so funny, and I gather it happened because the BBC, has a sort of base of operations in Cardiff, and therefore, how in the sort of 60s and 70s, like the Doctor can go anywhere in the universe, but somehow he always ends up in London in the 60s and 70s just because that's sort of cheapest to film. So with this, the kind of post 2005 Doctor Who series, Cardiff seemed to be that equivalent. So I just wanted to include this line where the Doctor isn't sure where they are, and Rose correctly predicts that they've landed in Cardiff like they always do. But of course, Cardiff isn't very foresty, so I kind of changed the line. So she said, we're within 10 miles of Cardiff or something like that. And then, so it's funny, whenever you're writing a novel, like little decisions like that, I just wanted to have that one funny line, kind of can spiral out into an entire setting. And that made it, I think, it was interesting kind of going back and rereading Frankenstein as well in preparation for kind of reading this and going like, wow, the geography of Frankenstein is also all over the place. Like Dr. Frankenstein himself is sort of Swiss, but also German, and also, actually, I don't even know if Germany was a thing quite when Mary Shelley was writing this. But yeah, I had to do all this sort of geographic research, and I confess I didn't quite get it right. I saw the Goodreads reviews are starting to come up, and I always read them all.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one review that said a near perfect evocation of the era, but for the fact that Wales seems to have locks in it.
Oh, you're a wee bit further north. You're in my country for them.
Yeah, exactly. So I went, no, I did all this Doctor Who research, but I forgot to check where locks are.
Do you know what happened? What? It was the Time War. That's what did it.
That would have done it. Yeah, absolutely. Or possibly maybe it was that deleted scene at the end where it turned out that the Doctor had been trapped by the God of Light again, and none of this is happening for real, or something like that.
Yep.
I'm loving how meta this new series is getting, by the way. That's I think it's as good as it has ever been, and maybe better in my view.
Your research is always the fun thing when it comes to something like this, because I think Frankenstein, as you say, it's or the modern Prometheus is so highly regarded, and one of, I suppose it's an early science fiction work, and it's so nice to be able to pull the Doctor into that kind of world, and sort of given that we've had the real Mary Shelley on TV as well, so that's, as you say, things getting meta.
Yeah, that's right. We had pretty early on when the first version I kind of pitched. So it's not spoiling too much about this book to say that the Frankenstein that the Doctor meets in this book is not the Frankenstein of the novel. It's a kind of different story to that. But one of the reasons that came about was because at first I had kind of misunderstood the brief. I thought we were putting the Doctor into these stories such that, how other than sort of the episode about Lux that we talked about a moment ago, how the Doctor is always visiting a world in which no one has heard of Doctor Who. Like, that's the main difference between the reality that the Doctor visits and our own. So in this instance, I had assumed that he would kind of be visiting a world in which the novel Frankenstein didn't exist, because he would be stepping into the real story. And then the BBC said, no, that's not really what we're going for. We're going for a world in which the novel Frankenstein exists, and the Doctor knows that, and Rose would know that, and they're mystified as to how they ended up in this situation. So that's how we ended up with this kind of different Dr. Frankenstein in the book. But it was so interesting looking at the way that placing someone like the Doctor in this particular story kind of unexpectedly, I didn't intend this, but it kind of sort of illuminated some more themes about the original story that than I had thought would happen. I had just thought, that the Doctor would investigate, there would be a monster, the monster would be, a bunch of human corpses stitched together and electrified by a madman, and then I would come up with kind of some sort of clever ending where the Doctor does that, he's not someone who just shoots people with a blaster. He would come up with some way to try to save everybody and all that stuff. One of the things I have always loved about Doctor Who, by the way, is just how, compared to, say, Star Wars, which was, the what I was watching at the same time in the 90s, like in most other sci-fi, but Star Wars is kind of an obvious example, the major characters, even the minor characters, none of them die, right? And if they do, they come back as a ghost. It's like the body count is 0, other than all these sort of faceless stormtroopers who just get mowed down and we're not expected to think about it, mowed down by the good guys and we're not expected to think about it. Whereas the Doctor, the body count is high, right? In every single one of these stories that I grew up reading as a kid, like some unfortunate person dies some horrible death being devoured by a, carnivorous plant or a telepathic spider or whatever. And instead of mowing down a bunch of bad guys like in any other sci-fi series, the Doctor fights for peace, and I just found that I hadn't realized how much Doctor Who had sort of shaped my own storytelling instincts until I started writing one of these stories and it wasn't that different from what I always do. And I was like, oh, well, okay, that's probably because I've been ripping Terrence Dicks off my entire career and never noticed until now. But sorry, I kind of lost the thread there. Oh yeah, so we were talking about kind of how the Doctor can illuminate various themes from Frankenstein, and so the Doctor spends so much time explaining to humans in the show, like not just in my book but throughout, that they have quite a narrow definition of what they think is possible. And I'm sure I'm not the first person to write a story where the Doctor says words to the effect of, you humans have a very narrow idea of what life is, like what you think is alive and what counts as a living being and what doesn't and stuff like that. And so those themes that the Doctor is talking about all the time, they slot so neatly into Frankenstein, like this idea of, what is the vital spark that, everyone was kind of obsessed with at the time that Mary Shelley was writing this. And one of the more difficult things about it, though, was that I couldn't come up with any lore. Like, if I were writing an episode of Doctor Who, then presumably I would be able to just sort of make up some facts about how the universe works, and then the Doctor Who universe just works that way. Whereas in this instance, and if the canon clashes with itself, that's fine because it's Doctor Who. There were so many instances where the copy editor would highlight something and say, well, this clashes with what was in episode 2 of season whatever, but that clashed with episode 5 of season whatever. So the show clashes with itself. You have to decide which one you're going to be in accordance with, but you can't do a third thing. So it was really interesting to be writing this kind of railroaded version of the Doctor where you have to be consistent with an inconsistent canon. Ultimately, the thing that I'm proudest of, though, is the fact that I was permitted to and was sort of artistically able to come up with a new creature. Like I wasn't especially, given that I was already putting Frankenstein in the story, I wasn't especially interested in adding Daleks or, the Slitheen or anything like that. I kind of wanted to make my own scary Doctor Who monster. And so being able to do that was just like such a treat, so much fun. A lot of my storytelling instincts were probably shaped by Stephen Moffat over the years as well, because I watched a lot of Coupling when that was on in the sort of late 90s and early 2000s. I'd watch those episodes over and over again, and there's probably ways in which it would be painfully dated, even offensive now, but the structure of it, the way that not a single line was wasted in terms of setting up either the audience's expectation of something or the character's expectation of something that was then going to be turned completely upside down. That was really a lot of fun. Here in Australia, where basically, I mean, there are Australian TV shows, but for the most part, we are kind of just bombarded with culture from the United States and the United Kingdom. We just get a lot of that stuff. And so we have front row seats to kind of the difference between British TV and American TV, which seems to be that American TV shows seem to have a lot more money, but not as much time. I think I've heard Hugh Laurie talk about this in interviews, like the fact that in Hollywood you have infinite money but no time, and in the UK you have very little money but you have a lot of time to think about what you're going to do. And that really showed with series like Coupling or Jonathan Creek or whatever those shows were, where you get kind of 6 ingenious episodes per year as opposed to 24 okay but very flashy ones. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. But just sort of refine it. You can refine what you're doing and keeping it as focused as can be when you've got that time on your side, and then make it for as little as possible. So
yeah, that's right. Why not do an only 4 episode season like with Douglas Was Cancelled, or only 3 like that wonderful first season of Black Mirror?
Absolutely. Gosh, forget there was only 3 there. That's very true. Now, just something you mentioned there, I thought was
featuring Jodie Whittaker, not for nothing.
That's very, yeah, absolutely. So that's a great teaser for Doctor Who and Frankenstein and the Patchwork Man. So I know that when we've been setting up this chat, you've been working on a deadline for your next book. Are you able to tease anything about that whatsoever?
Yeah, certainly. So the series that began with Kill Your Brother, which was then just released in the UK as The Mistake, that series then continued with Kill Your Husbands, which was released as The Wife Swap. So the book I just submitted in Australia will be called Kill Your Boss. I have no idea what the UK publisher is going to how it'll be sort of retitled or rejacketed over there. But the elevator pitch is that there's a police officer in a small Australian country town who successfully breaks up a fight between 2 men in front of the public library, only to have a man drop out of the sky and go splat on the stairs in front of her, and she realizes that he was the head librarian. The killer must be in the library. Classic sort of locked room mystery, but because the guy was such a terrible boss, everyone who worked there had a motive to do it. So that's the pitch for that one.
I cannot comment on having a terrible boss.
No one can. I'm slowly working my way through to trying to find the least popular person. So Kill Your Brother it did okay. Kill Your Husbands did much better. So maybe husbands are less popular than brothers, but bosses have got to be even less popular than husbands, right? I feel like I'm onto something.
Yeah. Newspaper reporters are always not very popular as well, having survived that for the best part of 20 odd years. So yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah, okay. My condolences.
Death threats from drug dealing taxi drivers, that kind of thing, just because you've exposed their activity. So
right. Oh, okay. You would have some exciting stories. As a general rule, when I get scary emails, it tends to be from fans. Like sometimes the fans are more of a problem than the haters. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm very, very glad to have readers. Like this is for a long time, no one was reading anything I was writing, so I don't take that privilege lightly. But when they are talking about how I got a death threat once because of how a book ended. The person was saying, how dare you do that to my favorite character? Sincerely, your number one fan. I went, oh boy, that's frightening. I've read Misery by Stephen King. I know how this.
Yeah, I'm just worried for you now in terms of like the Loch Lovers of Wales.
Yeah. I don't know. it's fun because I was talking a lot before about sort of all the proofreaders and copy editors who have an encyclopedic knowledge of Doctor Who lore. The reviewers on Goodreads, presumably, it's even better. So no doubt I've done all sorts of things that they won't like, but that's part of it, right? I think one of the most interesting parts about working in any creative industry or any artistic industry is you make a work of art and then you hand it over, right? Like, it's not yours anymore. And this is especially true of literature, when everyone gets to have kind of their own version of it in their heads. Everyone imagines it in a certain way, which is why when the movie comes out, you look at it and go, that's not what Hogwarts looks like, or whatever. So this means, and Doctor Who, it's a little bit more limited than that, because my readers won't, they'll have more ingredients to pull from, meaning that everyone's sort of vision of what the Doctor looks like in my book will be pretty close to everyone else's. But I also think everyone is allowed to do, once they've bought the book, it's theirs, right? Like, they own it. So they get to love it or they get to hate it. They get to misinterpret it if they want to, and that's fine. It's their property. So I've learned to kind of embrace that rather than resenting it over the course of my career.
Yeah, just as long as they buy the book, that's all that matters.
Yeah. I forgot to mention this earlier. I'm only in it for the money.
Well,
just imagine what a terrible career advisor at a school would say. Oh, you want to get rich quick scheme? Try writing novels.
Well, you never know. Juno Dawson's first published Doctor Who work was a novel for Jodie, so.
Oh, really?
Got the Interstellar contest, yeah.
Oh.
There you go.
Wow, that's really exciting. I would look, normally I'm the kind of person who, like, I didn't get into writing novels as a stepping stone for writing to TV. I am someone who generally prefers reading novels to watching television, so to me this is the sort of ideal medium to be working in. But if I ever got the chance to write an episode of Doctor Who, I would jump at that chance so hard. I would hit the ceiling jumping so hard to do it. So yeah, absolutely. I'm available, whoever, if any of your listeners is related.
Kill your Time Lord.
Oh, that's so good. Absolutely. Kill your companion.
Oh, kill your master. Oh no, we could be here all day doing this.
We could, and it'd be fun, but with time difference, I assume you have to get back to work and I have to go to bed pretty soon, probably.
Yes, indeed. But oh, Jack, thank you so much for taking the time to come on The Power of Three, and really, really enjoyed it.
Oh, it's been a privilege. Thanks so much for having me on, and thanks to all your listeners for listening to me waffle.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Jack. And please do look him up on social media and give him a follow, because this is a cracker of a book. Now, let's have a look and see what the Professional Critic said in Doctor Who magazine. This appeared earlier this year in issue 617, and it was written by David Richardson. He says, "There have been echoes of Frankenstein in Doctor Who before, most notably The Brain of Morbius and The Haunting of Via Diodati. But the latest title in the series of literary mashups moves even closer to Mary Shelley's source material. The horror masterpiece is repurposed, with added twists, as an adventure for the Ninth Doctor and Rose for BBC children's books, the linear narrative told in punchy, short chapters. The travellers arrive in Lamond in the 1830s, where local folk tales of a patchwork man appear to become real when a creature stalks the woods. Could the resident of the manor house, Dr. Vincent Frankenstein, be copying the experiments of his fictional almost namesake? Award-winning author Jack Heath never speaks down to the target audience and ensures that this is a book that will appeal to all ages, so expect a gothic treat where the tone sometimes leans into the visceral. The creature turned his big head, mismatched vertebrae clicking as he scanned the clearing. And there is no shortage of genre tropes. There's even a tavern where the locals fall silent when the Doctor and Rose first enter. Heath returns to Doctor Who's original mission statement to educate as well as entertain, and so some enlightening historical facts are scattered throughout. The dynamic between the Ninth Doctor and Rose is captured perfectly, two best mates embracing the trip of a lifetime, and their joy is infectious. Though written in the third person, the story is largely seen through Rose's eyes, and she is its heart and soul. Intelligent but not intellectual, brave, curious and kind. An intriguing spin of Mary Shelley's timeless horror, Frankenstein and the Patchwork Man may not be dazzlingly original, but it's certainly highly entertaining and, for younger fans, an admirable gateway to discovering classic literature. So yes, thumbs up there from David, and I give it a real thumbs up myself. Thoroughly enjoyed reading this one. Plenty going on, lovely little bits, like as David says, information about when the light bulbs were first developed. And there's the intriguing stuff when the sonic screwdriver gets stuck to a wall. How does the Doctor get it back? There's only one way to find out. Read the book! There's some great ratings over in Goodreads now, a few more since I originally spoke to Jack. It's had a rating of 4.20 from 49 ratings and 7 reviews. 5 stars, 34%, 4 stars, 55%, 3 stars, 6%, 2 stars, 4%, 1 star, none. Which is good news. There's a 5-star review from Ian Robinson. He says, another terrific read in the Doctor Who Puffin Classic series. This one takes very little from the Mary Shelley story and instead repositions it as a 4th Doctor style adventure with New Who pacing. There's plenty of twists and turns and mild scares to keep you on your toes. I don't think the Doctor and Rose sound quite right, but they act like they did on TV. So that's just a minor niggle. Jack Heath isn't an author I know, but I'd love to have him write Doctor Who again. 4 stars from Daniel Kukwa. This book ended up being a pleasant afternoon read. A slice of gothic 4th Doctor era goodness transplanted to the 9th Doctor and Rose, with a neat take on Frankenstein, typically creepy and Doctor Who goodness, we're not using the W word, done with style and panache. There's 4 stars from John Arnold. A near-perfect evocation of the era, spoiled only by the weird idea that Wales has locks, and everyone treating it as normal. It's the Time War, John. Blame the Time War. Finally, 4 stars from George Ivanov as well. Latest crossover book in which Doctor Who gets mixed in with classic lit. I had the chance to read an early version of this one, so was super excited to read the published version. Loved it all over again. Jack is spot on with his characterisation of Rose and Doc 9. The way Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is woven into the story is perfection. And hey, Bowie gets a mention. Very cool. Def's a top-notch Doctor Who book. I think it's fair to say that it's a winner. And it seems an appropriate time to be looking at this one, given that the 9th Doctor and Rose are back in our ears with Big Finish. Remember, you can leave a review for us if you've enjoyed what we've done, so go to your podcatcher of choice, whether it's iTunes, Apple Store, whatever, I don't know, I only use Podbean. So please do leave us a positive review if you're enjoying what the Power of 3 does. We're on social media, we're at Power of 3 Pod on Twitter with the number 3, on Blue Sky as at Finished Scene, and we have a Facebook group too. So we're out of time, and as ever we like to play out with a track, and given that we haven't had them for a wee while, I think it's time to bring back Pet Shop Boys, my eternal favourites. So with a track from the bilingual album, it's the appropriately named Electricity. Until next time, bye bye.
What does it mean? What are you doing in San Francisco?
I'm an artist, honey. You'll see me sometimes making crazy pictures out of music and rhymes. Costume changes performed with poise, dancing information with a couple of boys. I take them on the road with my reel-to-reels. I'm an artist, honey. You know how that feels? The greatest show, the best face.